This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Winter Moon and Coffee Stain, poems and lyrics by Keith Giles. In this collection, author and poet Keith Giles has gathered some of his best poems and song lyrics into one volume. Written between 1980 and 2024, these poems span a variety of subjects ranging from love and loss to grief and restoration, and everything learned along the way. Winter Moon and Coffee Stain available now on Amazon.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat Turney. I'm with my brother John, as always, up in the upper left-hand corner of the Hollywood Squares. See, we're interviewing people our age today, so we can say stuff like that. Don't know what we're talking about. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
Hey, and this is the podcast you have come to know and love as This Is Not Church, because if it was church, you'd have got the hell out of here by now. And, John and I we'd be right there with you. But hey, as always, man, we have an awesome guest to interview and to introduce y'all to. So let me just get to it before I blather on for too long. This is pretty quick, right, John? Usually I wrap it at least once or twice.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Hey, I'm zero.
Streamlined today.
I'm on it, man. I've had caffeine. So I'm focused, but let's get to it. So Brian K Woodson Sr. Has a Bachelor of Industrial Design degree from Syracuse University. Okay, I said all of that and I set myself up for failure. I can't even say Syracuse.
Yeah, you shouldn't drink before you do the podcast.
I know. I should drink during the podcast. This is what I decided. Okay, so a Bachelor of Industrial Design degree from Syracuse University and a Master of Divinity degree from United Theological Seminary, not ceremony, and has served in the United States Air Force. For the past 25 years, he has been the senior pastor of a progressive church in the Bay Area and currently serves as a director with Faith in Action East Bay. All these experiences contributed to Woodson's already rich imagination to create the odyssey that is Purplynd, which is the book that is out. Woodson is the author of many articles and Meditations of a Madman, The Musings of a Hated Man, Loving God. He is married to Valerie McCann Woodson, and together they have 3 amazing sons and a daughter that tops them all. So she's the favorite, man. All right, before I blunder any more of this, let me give Brian a chance to correct any errors in the record. Welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing really great. Thanks. Good to be with you. Looking forward to an engaging conversation.
Well, good. I hope it is. I hope that's the extent of my bumblings, but I wouldn't hold out too much hope. I mean, for those of you who won't be able to see this video, you should know that there are 3 bearded men, which I always take as a good omen. You know, 3 on a match might be bad luck, but 3 with a beard is always good luck. So we are sadly missing our partner in crime, Bethany, who is vacationing in Mexico as we speak. So otherwise, she would have brought some much needed wit and wisdom to the conversation. But we'll have to muddle on, as it were, without her. I didn't realize that you had served the Air Force. How long were you in the Air Force again?
Oh, yeah, that was a lifetime ago. I was in about 6 years in active duty. We were engaged in, I had 2 different assignments. One was the propaganda arm, where we told people how great it was to come and be a part of the Air Force. And I found out, I learned how how governments lie in that job. And then I went to design or be a part of the designing of multi-crew cockpits, the big planes, the big beasts.
Nice. I was in the Air Force, so that's why it struck me as interesting.
There you go. What you do?
I was one of those Intel weenie guys.
Okay. So you know we lied too, don't you?
Oh man. The day I was 22 when I joined, so old enough to know that I was being lied to. I got it. You know what I mean? So I went to see the propaganda man at the recruiting station, and I knew. So I wasn't putting too much stock in what he was saying. But when I got recruited for the job that I had, then he lied, because he could not have known. I mean, everything in that job is top secret, SCI clearance. It's all this other. So he lied through his teeth. He had no clue what I was going to be doing. But again, if you go in knowing you're being lied to, it's not quite as hurtful. No.
Yeah. So yeah, not to be off topic, but if we could just rip, the thing about the military that I found, there's both the best that a human being can be and the worst, right? Because you lay your life down for somebody you don't even know. because he's in, and then again, we're run by politicians and corporate guys that throw us at machine guns. It's so,
Exactly.
it's crazy, crazy thing.
Yeah, it is a very strange. I do remember, because I was in from 94 to 2006. I was in for 12 years. And, honestly, it was some of the best and some of the worst times of my life. I mean, there were people there that, like you said, were amazing. And I got to see a lot of, there's a lot of altruism. And I do believe that by and large the military in general is one of the few meritocracies that exist. And not a perfect meritocracy, obviously, but by and large, people got ahead based on their skill and based on what they could or couldn't do.
Yeah. So here, you want a story? So it's an upside down meritocracy. So I was when I was in jump school, I had a good friend, Archie. He almost got me killed because he's just so funny. You're one guy in your life that he's the funniest guy ever, right? And this guy I'm in jump school with. Anyway, he said, Woody, the military is crazy because they give you this impossible job. And if you get it done, they give you a more impossible job. So, yeah.
I found that to be true. That's true in almost everything I've done in my life, where impossible things are given to you. And the biggest mistake you can do is accomplish those goals.
Exactly.
And all you've done is tell them it can be done. So next time I can do it with less resources. I work in a job right now where they'll hand me a project for something and they'll say, listen, I know this is crazy, but we need this in, a quarter of the time we would normally give you. And I go out and bust my ass and I do it and I pat myself on the back to get it done, get my kudos. And then I'm like, oh shit, what did I just do? I just told all those people who don't plan and who don't schedule things right and who don't budget appropriately, that I'm willing to go crazy to get it. It was a dumb idea. But anyway, it was an interesting time of life. And as soon as you said what you said about that, it's a lifetime ago, that's exactly how it feels. I mean, I don't even feel like I'm not the same person. And I don't know how you feel about stuff like that anymore. I'm so in a different part of my life. I don't feel that way about the military anymore. I wouldn't join today. There's things, the sort of the path my life has taken towards nonviolence and that nature make me go, yeah, that was fine for a 22-year-old me, but 50-year-old me, hell no, I'm not going to go fight your wars for you. But I still appreciate the men and women who do it, and I know most of them I think have the best of intentions. But that being said, let's talk about your book, man. That's ostensibly why you're here, and we'd love to hear all about it and make sure I pronounce the name correctly. Purplynd.
Yeah, that's right.
Got an awesome spelling, Purplynd. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So talk to us about that a little bit. Give us a little intro.
Oh yeah, and if you want, I could read a section for you. But
yeah, that'd be great.
The book started the story started as children's church time when you're talking about trying to keep the kids interested. And parenthetically, yeah, I'm a radical, kind of crazy, kind of Jesus person that I wouldn't fit in anybody's church. So there's that. But I'm doing this children's story, and Matthew has around the 32nd verse has this. Jesus is talking about, I'm going to separate, or there's going to come a time where we separate the sheep from the goats, right? And separating sheep from the goats. So I'm like, okay, I can see a sheep and a goat. I mean, the goat has horns, right? Okay, that's not hard. But how do you do that with people, right? And so I imagined, what about there was a world where you could see, okay, that one's red and that one's blue, easy to separate. So that's how that part of the Purplynd came into being, that you are judged, or you could be judged by the color of your skin, right? But like in the Matthean text, nobody could see each other's colors. You can't see each other's colors. So it's kind of crazy. So Purplynd is a world where the color of your skin matters, but nobody sees the color of your skin, right? Except people who have certain gifts and are different. And then people are not really segregated, and this is a little spoiler alert, but they're not separated by the color of their skin, but they are very much so by the color of their eyes. So it's an engaging, hopefully engaging story. I call it a romantic utopian mystery. So the mystery part, you both have already kind of experienced, is kind of like, how do these pieces fit together? I know they're all going to come together at some point. How do they fit? The utopian part is because I'm trying to figure out, is love really more powerful than hate, right? And if love is more powerful than hate, then how is that power manifested? How is hatred and evil defeated? If love can't pick up the tools of hatred and fight the battle, right? So that the book is really kind of grappling with that question, and it does some wonderful things. I think wonderful, tricky things, like in the Bible there are three Marys, right? At the cross, there's three Marys. So that's why the book has the main characters of the book, it has three daisies, right? So somebody would ask, well, why you have three daisies? Just give the women different names. And sometimes you confuse, which daisy is this? Well, that's all deliberate. You have, three Marys in the Bible. And then the book starts, I'm told it starts slow, but I think it's crazy for a guy, me, a male, writing about a woman's experience, but it begins with kind of like the birth, the nativity story, right? So what would it be like? What would it be like raising a perfect child, right? Or raising the Messiah? What's that? What would that be like? You know what I mean? And you find out in the end that there's this crazy promise that Daisy just has to make, which is like, oh my God, how could you enter into any contract making a promise like that, and what happens in your life and how life evolves. So those are some of the things. I don't want to be a spoiler, but
yeah, for sure. No, we want to hold some mystery back. One thing that I think we can say without giving anything away would be, first of all, I did not find it slow to start at all. Whoever said that, I don't know. I don't believe it. It's confusing to start, but in a good way. And I like that. I don't like stories that I can either begin to intuit, I kind of see where this is going. You know what I mean? I'm not saying there aren't good stories like that, but I'm usually put off by that. So I felt hooked immediately, mostly because I was confused. And I'm like, if I'm going to get past the confusion, I'm going to have to keep reading and see what happens. So like we spoke about offline, I'm into it. I haven't finished it. And I'm like, as soon as we're done, I'm going to go back to it, and I think that will be, let me just give that plug for the book. If you're sitting here and you're wondering, it'll be one that's hard to put down, I think. It's going to be one that I think you're going to want to plug through to the end and find out. And it's part of a trilogy, right?
Right. Yes.
So there's hope for more.
Yeah.
So I think that's amazing too. I love books that are part of a series or my favorite books are always series or trilogies of some kind. But John's the same way. We're both into
Yeah.
Well, and let me ask you this too, because sort of the trend for a long time now has been dystopian books. And so as soon as you said utopian, I was like, okay, so was that also a deliberate thing to go, well, okay, enough has been written in this sort of dystopian style.
Oh man.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I really don't like stories with sad endings. I don't go to movies to watch movies to be educated because I'm sad all the time, right? I'm already depressed all the time. I want a diversion. I can see the ruin of our society and everything every day. So I want to read something that makes me feel hopeful. And I think the best and the wisest of us, whatever religion you have, are merchants in hope, right? And one of the things I say often is hope is the engine of life, right? And from my own life's experience, having been suicidally depressed at one time for a long period of time, when you run out of hope, you run out of reasons to live. For me, that was it. Hope is the engine of life, and so let's have stories of hope, right? And they're important. Yeah, hope is the engine of life. Faith is its fuel, and our imaginations drive. Let's let's have some dreams and go places and go on roads that are not charted, and who knows where they'll go. But we hope, we hope don't crash, and we hope, we won't go over a cliff. But I think another thing, I think that the world needs hope now more than before, I think, and I think we're moving into this moment where we have so much, and then it's almost as if we have so little at the same time.
Another part of your book that really stands out for me, and is another thing that would be hard for me to overlook if it was done wrong or done poorly, is world building. And I think you've done a really good job on building a world that I can visualize. Like as I'm reading through, I can visualize where they are, what they're doing, and how it's, how it look. My version of it might be slightly different than someone else's because I'm building it in my head. But what was the process like to do that? Because I think that's a pretty daunting task.
Oh, thank you so much for saying so. And in part because, my art background, I see it. I see it before I write it. I have to actually see what it looks like. And then I have a couple of children who will correct me, right? You can't do that. And they really are, I have some sci-fi geeks as sons, and they are like really, it really bugs them if the world that's created doesn't really work, right? So I have that over my shoulder, that little voice in my ear. But thanks for saying that.
What I'm thinking back to, like, my all-time favorite writers ever, and John and I are both big fantasy nerds, right? John way before I was, but I caught up later. But if I'm sitting there and I was to name, writers who I think, who personify this the best, it's always writers who do that world building thing, where they create something that is at once so dissimilar but familiar, weirdly enough at the same time. So I think of a guy like obviously Tolkien with Middle Earth, where you have, but then John and I read a lot of Terry Brooks back in the day. And my current favorite writer is a guy named Brandon Sanderson, but he writes these epic fantasies, and the worlds are completely different. And he's always got some sort of magic thing going on there. So that's what I'm glad John brought that up, because I had that same sense with reading your book. I'm like, okay, he's creating something here that is, and what I like, and this is maybe just a writing technique thing. I like that you just introduce things, and don't feel the need to explain them. You let the process play out, and that is the explanation for what. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah. Thanks. Because when I read and they're explaining things and I get bored, I didn't want that to happen, right? Yeah. They're saying the tree is this way, and then it shows that they've done so much research about about a forest or whatever, but then I get bored. I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah, I think it plays into what you assume is the intelligence of your reader. Like, they're going to figure this out without me having to beat them over the head with this.
Right.
Right. And it may take. We talked about offline. We also talked about The Matrix, because that's the experience that I had going to see The Matrix for the first time, which was one of just 35 or 40 minutes of what the hell is this? I like it, but I don't know what's going on. Why can they do these things? Why, and I had that same sort of sense of almost disorientation reading the first few parts of your book in a very, very good way. So, and that's rare, honestly. A lot of times I don't know that writers take the intelligence of their readers seriously enough, and let them give them a chance to figure out what's going on. So kudos on that. So, again, I can't wait to get back into it. But
so it is a great privilege to get inside somebody's head, right? And that's what we're doing as authors, right? And it's the most powerful way to have a conversation. If someone will give you the time to read, and I wanted to leave some creative space in there, right? Because some people, have read the book and they talk to me about the characters or how they look, and I was like, wow, that's pretty creative. That's not what I was thinking, but that works. So you want to leave some creative space for them to own it and create it, co-create it, right? And yeah.
I'm assuming, so don't hit me for assuming, but that there's some allegorical meaning in some of it. Or is this just purely a story that if we derive something from it, great, but maybe that wasn't the intention?
Oh no, I am like I am deliberately trying to translate what was and should be the way for all of us, right? So I'm taking the gospel and trying to wring out of it all the supremacy and all the yuck and muck that came out. I think, okay, I might get in trouble here, but I read this book, Saving Paradise. Anyone ever read that book by Rita Nakashimi Brock and Rebecca Parker? Saving Paradise. Anyway, the impetus for their book was someone told Rebecca and Rita that the iconography of the church, that the cross was not in the church until the 10th century. And they're like, what? And so they started researching and they found out and they wrote this book. But one of the takeaways from that book is, well, when most of us think of paganism now, they say, no, that was the way. That's what the followers of Jesus were doing. They were like respecting the trees and they were like living in communal ways that like, after Constantine, it got all kinds of crazy. But so in Purplynd, I'm trying to just throw out some of the crap that has layered, the Christianity and layered what Jesus came and did, and I said, I used to say, and I'm going to have to stop saying this, but it was only me transitioning from all the theology I had ate as a child to something a little more liberative and something a little more real. But I used to think of God on a throne, right? Big, bad God on a throne, ruling and reigning and all that, right? And I come to realize when my soul kind of got liberated. No, you should think of Jesus like laying in the grass, smoking a joint, looking at the clouds. And that Jesus is like, okay, I got, it's like, okay, yeah, that works a lot better than this ruling guy, sitting on the throne with angels running around. Man, just smoking, sitting around, Hey, how you doing today? Did you enjoy it? And coming in my prayer life, Jesus like, take a puff, brother. Just relax for a minute. You're taking yourself way too serious, brother.
That's a guy I can hang out with.
Right. Yeah.
The other God inspires fear and distance and makes you want to go, well, maybe I shouldn't approach that guy. But if I see a dude, laying in the park, watch the clouds go by, I might go hang out.
Yeah.
I'm with you though, because so much of I'm not sure if this has been your experience as well, but I got to a point in my life where I realized, that most of what I would have thought of as my theology, I didn't adopt any of it. Like, what's the word? Deliberately. It was all stuff that was inherited. It was stuff that I learned in church, stuff that I gleaned in church, stuff that other people that were supposedly trustworthy had told me. And then the older I got, I realized they're all full of shit, and they were all, okay, not all of them, most of them. And most of the images I'd gotten of God were pretty toxic and were pretty far off the mark, I think. So I like that idea of stripping that. That's what deconstruction has come to mean for me anyway, is this act of rebellion in that you are stripping away all the stuff that you think, besmirch the image of God. Well, let's get that stuff out of there.
Yeah.
Get to the heart of it.
Yeah. And I don't even know if deconstruction is a good phrase. We ought to find our own, because there's so much destruction going on. I shouldn't say it this way, but a monkey with a hammer can destroy things, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
We're not talking when we're deconstructing our faith and religion. We're not going at it with a hammer. we're holding on to the essential, right? We're saying, like, what's essential about this, right? And letting go of the things that, okay, that can't make sense, right? It can't make sense that, half the people in the world are going to, burn in hell forever because they didn't say some magic words, right?
Right.
That can't be right,
Make that make sense, right?
Go, right? You gotta let that go, And okay, this person doesn't look exactly like me or think exactly like me, so they go to hell. No, we gotta let that go too,
Yeah, well, when you get to a place where the God of your theology cares more about who people sleep with than who we go to war with.
Right, that's it.
Like, really? That's the big concern for you.
Right. Right.
I'll push back a tiny bit and say, for me, there is some destruction that has to happen. So for me, it's kind of like going at a piñata, like the good stuff's inside.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to beat the hell out of it for the good stuff to come out. Sometimes you have to light the thing on fire to see what survives the fire.
Okay.
So for me, it was, setting charges of explosives at, key places and bringing the whole damn thing down and then sifting through the rubble to find out what survived and what was
real.
And that's not everyone's experience. Some people that I've talked to were way more deliberate. And they were maybe more methodical about it. And they're like, well, we'll look at this. We'll take this little piece apart. And they're like my son when he was 5 years old, taking apart my VCR, which he never put back together.
I love your son.
He's an engineer today.
Exactly. I know.
But he had to know how it worked. Right? And he's a little kid with a screwdriver. And I'm like, well, that's great. Now you know how this all goes. Yeah. Can you put it back together? Well, no, I don't know. But his approach was to dismantle it. And literally, I watched him do it for a while. He didn't know I was watching. And I'm like, well, and I just watched him little piece by little piece. And I could see it clicking in his brain that this piece turned this piece. And that made that lever work. And I see people doing that, or I see some people have that approach to this process. And I think it's great. It's just not how my mind works. I'm a blow the shit up and see what survives guy. And then if it can't survive my little explosion, it wasn't, then in my brain, then it couldn't have been real or it would have survived. But
a great way to look at God. If God can't, survive our explosion, then hey, that is not God, right? And I get it. And I very much like your son grew up taking things apart. Most of the things I got back together. Not all of them, most of them. And there's you touch on something I just want to mention that has been really formative in my life. There are crises of faith that I've had, right? That's like, oh, wait a minute. If this is true, then I got to throw this thing away. I'll mention a couple. One was, I'll just mention two. One was translating Hebrew, because I was a big Hebrew guy. I was raised that the Bible is true. It's God's word. It's really right. You got to read it. And so I'm translating the Hebrew, and I get to a place in Leviticus, the 25th chapter, I'm translating, and it literally says that these people can be enslaved and their progeny in perpetuity. And I closed the book and I put it aside, because something has to be either I don't know what that book is, or nobody needs it. Right? Or nobody needs it. And it was a crisis. And I had to figure that out. I had to work my way through it. And I think, I'm very thankful that I work for. But there are a lot of people stuck in that thing, A lot of people stuck like, yeah, that's right. You my slave. Well, you know what? If that book leads you there, you need to throw that book out, because, it's just not right. And then more recently, I think it was November 9th, 2016, when 82% of evangelicals, 83% of evangelicals voted for one particular presidential candidate. And I said, okay, this book is not what I thought it was, is I gotta rethink who I am and what I'm doing here, because that ain't it.
Yeah, I think it had that effect on a lot of us. That was my official parting of the ways with evangelicals.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is who you are.
Yeah.
So, and what's that old line about when someone tells you who they are, believe them. So that's it. You've shown me enough.
Believe them the first time, but we don't, do we?
Yeah. But that was, and the percentage of white evangelicals who voted supposedly in their own best interests, and to the detriment of others. And it's about to come back around again, I'm afraid. I don't think we're done quite yet exposing what's happened there. But I had that same exact, I was listening to a guy on YouTube who was an atheist, and brilliant guy, really smart guy. And I've been trying to listen to that point of view a lot, because most of my life I was told, don't listen to those guys, they'll lead you astray. Well, no, actually the problem is they're asking hard questions. And some of them are disingenuous, sure. There's always disingenuous assholes everywhere. But a lot of them are asking really, really good, probing questions.
Right.
If we don't have an answer to it, then we need to do what you just did and rethink it. And that issue of slavery comes up a lot.
Right.
Listen, your Bible doesn't only condone it. It actually tells you how to do it.
Right.
There are passages of scripture that tell you how much you should pay for a Hebrew slave or a non-Hebrew slave, and ones can be held over into perpetuity. I mean, and then even if you search through the New Testament, you never get a repudiation of that. You get Paul telling slaves to love their masters. And you can nuance that all you want to and look for the reasons for that. I'm not saying that Paul was necessarily pro-slavery, but it never occurred to Jesus once to say, you know what, owning people is wrong. Could there not be one verse in there that just says, hey, I find this objectionable, and God the Father says that owning human beings is a sin? Okay, and then move on to the next thing. I mean, could it not have been one of the Beatitudes?
Right.
Blessed are those who refuse to own other people.
It wasn't that hard, just a couple of words, right?
I just fixed the Bible.
Right. You have to, Nate, you have to get to the Jesus in the grass smoking the joint. That when you get there, he's like, no, man, that wasn't me. I never said that stuff.
He's like, man, I didn't say it because I didn't think it needed to be said.
Right.
Seemed like common sense to me, but had to make sure and mention though that that others, I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff that gets mentioned. But I agree with you. There are these crises of faith. And I think if we all were to look back and go, okay, what was it that caused me sleepless nights? What were the things that caused me to really question whether the hope is worth saving at all? I think Brian McClaren wrote a really amazing book a couple of years ago called Should I Stay Christian? And he brings up in the first half of that book, I think 10 really compelling reasons to not.
Right.
And there are good reasons to, and then 10 really good reasons to stay. But on balance, it's an amazing book. But he brings up these questions and he's like, man, if this is true, I am sympathetic to those who say I can't do this anymore.
Right.
Like for this would be one reason enough to say, I don't think so. But
yeah, heck with it. Right.
But if you dig farther, I think that's what one of the things that I'm hopeful, and I think that your book does is cause us to dig deeper and find the beauty even amongst some of the other stuff that we find objectionable, and to say there is gold there, right, among the dross.
Yeah, and what I'm writing about, I think we said before we started taping, the question for me is love more powerful?
Yeah.
Right? Is love more powerful than hatred and all the tools that hatred and greed use, right? Is love and gentleness. One of the things we say in my community is let love lead you gently through life, right? Because love knows the way. But is that just a sucker's thing, you know? And so the book is grappling with that. And the book is, hopefully we get to a place where we could all say, now there's love. That's how it works. That's how it works. And that's what the book is. One of the main things the book is dealing with. And then what is evil and who is evil, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what's it look like? Does it just look like, you can see evil soon as you meet it?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Not usually.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come smiling and offering gifts. But the way you put it, though, before we started recording, I didn't want to forget, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because put it in the back of my brain to ask you about this. You said, can love defeat hate without using the same tools that hate uses?
There you go.
Talk to me about that, because that sounds an awful lot like the third way of Jesus. How does love do that without becoming?
Yeah, that's absolutely the question, right? So, a form of the other book I wrote was the other book I published was Meditations of a Madman. Subtitle of it is The Musings of a Hated Man Loving God. So, as an African American male, my experience is such, and I write in the book, just as the dedication of the book, to love God desperately while being hated openly can only be gently lived in madness, right? So to love God desperately, the definition for desperation, or that I like, is to stake everything on one chance, on a single thing, right? So all of this Christianity stuff that I say I believe and that I've held on to all my life through all the crazy, it's all predicated on one unrepeatable, unscientific, crazy thing, right? This resurrection, that's desperation, right? To love God desperately, to say, okay, I'm going to take this as being true. Nobody can prove it. Can't be done, never been done before, never been done again. So that's desperate. To love God desperately while being hated openly, to be an African American in America, is to suffer the ubiquitous, benign hatred of the world. It's not in your face. It's just there, It's just your paper is like a B and, other papers are A. It's like, I'm going to watch you walk through the store, or you're cool, but you're just not as cool as, whatever, right? So to love God desperately while being hated openly can only be gently lived. Now, there are people who love God and are abused, and their response is, oh, we're going to bomb you, right? We're going to bomb you to like smithereens, right? We're going to destroy your hospitals, your universities, and everything, because we love God, right? And you treated us wrong, so this is our retaliation. But it can only be gently lived, always grappling with, is this the right thing to do, or am I being a sucker? You know what I mean? Am I being gentle, or I'm just letting people roll over me? You know what I mean? And where do you find the strength? And is that renewing? Is the love that we hold on to and put out into the world, even though it gets spit on, run over by a truck and whatever, is it worth it? And I am tempted to believe that the measure of that love is our lives. So even though when we're living love, you know what I mean? Our body is kind of like cool. Our body's like more in harmony with nature, with the real creation. And even though that's not always responded to, even though that's not always received, it is still a life force for us, is what I'm playing with, you know what I mean? And it's a life force that in Purplynd is connected with the creation, right? That the creation itself holds life, right? And holds a sentience and things that we can commune with if we're willing not to take an axe to trees, right? And hug some of them instead, So I addressed your question. Did I answer it? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and I think at the end of the day, and I cut you off, John, I'll let you go in just a second, but I think the way you put that was, is this madness something I should invest in, or am I being a sucker for this? And that's the risk, right? Is this the line that's been used? There's so many cliches about only love can, Martin Luther King Jr., we love to quote him when it suits us. But only love, darkness can't drive out darkness, and the light can do that, love, same thing. But it doesn't address the how. And I do think that for a lot of people, and maybe you find yourself in this boat, those lines have been used against you to say, listen, you're supposed to love me, even though I openly hate you, even though you had to live through hardships and and discrimination. So sometimes Christians use that against other believers as a form of as a weapon, in a sense, to say, listen, I can abuse you, but you're supposed to forgive me because that's the Christian way, sir. Well, maybe the Christian way was to not abuse me in the first goddamn place. Maybe that little sword cuts both ways.
That thing, right? Yeah.
It's kind of like how people wield, forgiveness on abuse victims, and again, I'm not saying don't forgive people. I'm saying you shouldn't be coerced into forgiveness if that's not where you're at, and if doing that means that you have to somehow deny your own pain, well, that's not correct either. So anyway, all these things are really, see how like the question can just go and can go and can go, and it leads to these great conversations. But I cut John off in the middle of something.
Well, it was something you said. I'm going to step back a little bit, and you were talking about the connectedness.
See, I'm not the only one bumbling.
Yeah, I can't speak either.
The connectedness
of the characters to this place. And it reminded me of something that happens in more than one occasion in the book. And that's one of the characters puts their hand down on Purplynd as if there's something there, right? And like Nat and I both haven't finished the book. So I'm hoping that it's not something I'm putting into it myself, but it feels very intentional. Am I right or am I wrong?
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you this. So years and years ago, I heard this story, a testimony on KPFA, the leftist radio station in Berkeley, right? True story. This guy was sent home to die, right? He was given like days, if not hours, to live. I forget all the things he had wrong with him. But he said he crawled out of his house through his garden, and he just laid, because he couldn't walk or anything. He was dying, and he laid and he held the tree. He held on to the roots of his tree, and the guy got healed, right? So that's what kind of went into the book, kind of that this notion that there can be a connection with the living planet and our own lives, a healing connection. Like I think you're both past the point where we talked about a certain set of circumstances that was so horrid that they couldn't hold the horror in their own hearts and minds, and they had to give that horror into the planet where there was room enough to hold it, right? Where there's room enough to hold it. You got it. We're talking about healing here, right? Definitely.
Well, it's something too that I think that, the more we study the early church and the more we study, I love how you bring that, the quote unquote pagan sort of ideas into this, but I feel like the farther removed we get from where Christianity began, we get farther from those roots of that connectedness, so I don't know if you've heard the term panentheism, but that's kind of where I see myself these days, not the idea that, so pantheism is God is everything. Panentheism is God is in everything. And I think if we would get back to this idea that if God is what I think God is, and I don't know for sure, what do I know? But in my estimation, God is the creative force behind everything in the universe, which means he's put himself or herself into everything. That means everything carries the DNA of God. Certainly every human being, every living thing. But the more we get down the road, religion puts us into dualistic places where there are places where God is and there's places where God isn't. Gets us into this heaven and hell thinking, this very binary thinking of what is good and what is bad, and God, separating the sheep from the goats and all that other stuff. But when I read your book and I feel and I get this imagery of this deep connectedness, I'm like, that resonates with something that I think, at least I know in some part of my life, of myself, is true. Is that something you sense as well? That's a reality for us, that we're deeply connected to everything and everyone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so in the book, and as you read the story, and actually the message of the story, right, is on the horizon. It's in the background, right? So I want you to get involved and invested in the characters and what's happening, meanwhile, there's a storyline behind it all. There's some meaning behind it all.
I feel like there are other aspects in your book that I feel like you're addressing hierarchy, patriarchy, just by the sheer characters that you've built in there. And that I find interesting also, because I haven't finished the book, Nat and I haven't finished the book, but it's subtle. It's not like, I've read books where, and not to say that they're not good books, but they're addressing a specific thing where they're addressing these ideas, full force. Yours seems to be subtle and addressing them kind of in an undertone. But I do notice that specifically within like character building and all that. Is that something that was done intentional as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's absolutely. And I remember what I was going to say. So you'll see in the book, this is part of the subtlety. So the concrete and steel Prometheus, right, is one part of this world, right? And then there's let's live in nature, right? Let's hear the wisdom in nature. Let's respect that nature knows more than you about some things, right? And it will share it with you if you are open and deserving. Yeah. So yeah, deliberately. Yeah.
Okay. And I have to say that as I was reading the description of the book, that it brought to mind for me an episode of the original Star Trek. And that's I don't know if you remember the original episode where there is a race of people and they're black on one face, and white on the other. Yeah. And the characters within the Enterprise couldn't figure out why these two groups of people hated each other, right? You're like, you look exactly the same. But it turns out that one has black on the left and one has black on the right. And it's like this really subtle way. And yours is like you have these two different colors, but they can't see the colors. But there's still something brewing between the red and the blue, right?
Right. And red and blue make purple, as all of us who play with colors know, right? Yeah. And at first my first thought was that, red was going to be the evil people, the bad people, and blue are going to be the good people. But it doesn't quite work out that way, It doesn't. It's not so. It's not a binary thing, It's like, wait a minute, and then the Christ figure as you keep reading. I think I do some very deliberate and different things, trying to destroy this notion, like we all as kids were taught. Oh yeah, God is like this. He's the supreme ruler, and you got to do what he says, and blah 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 blah. From the throne to the laying in the grass kind of, God. So yeah, you
get a supreme being more like the one from The Fifth Element, who just is there but needs a little bit of help to move along. Right?
I love that movie so much.
Yeah, I love it. That was a great movie. Which is a great. There's some really deep strains of rabbinic study that kind of posit that God is evolving, and or God needs some help, kind of figure things out.
Yeah. Well, there's an author that John and I are friendly with, named Thomas Ord, and he's written a couple of different books on the topic of addressing the so-called omnipotence of God and taking issue with that, saying, listen, that's our perception of a God that is supremely all-powerful. No. And so he just wrote a book called The Death of Omnipotence, The Birth of Amnipotence, which is, instead of all-powerful, it is all-loving. So whatever we say about God's power is driven by love and not controlling. And so the other book he wrote was called The Uncontrolling Love of God, which is, it was the first time in a long time I'd read something that was like, okay, this is closer to what I think might be true. So because love doesn't, we all know this. We've had relationships, and we have people in our lives, and loving relationships aren't controlling relationships. And so therefore I don't believe God is one that's controlling and moving around pieces on the chessboard. And so getting back to the reason why I jumped on that train of thought was, there's a God that actually requires human intervention. That, it goes back to the whole, Julian Norwich, the famous poem that was, Christ has no hands but yours, Christ has no feet but yours. And so we have this great tradition of actually seeing ourselves as the hands and feet of God, because outside of us intervening and helping and partnering with God, things don't get done. And
Yeah. Two things. One thing, the thing that I had in mind was, I was reading some African cosmology, and there are two gods, or they wouldn't be gods at all, but two notions of acceptance and understanding. There's I think it's Amen and Anu or something. But there's an embrace of the fact that there's more to be known that we can know than we can know, right? There's more that can be known than any one person can know, right? And then there's an infinite amount of things that are unknowable, right? So in the infinite knowable things, we only have a sparse understanding of what we can know. And then there's an infinite amount of things that are unknowable. And it is that, the embrace of that humility, I think, that could be the genesis of what I say the whole Bible and everything is all about, which is two words: interconnected interdependence. That's what it's all about. Interconnected, interdependent. We are all a part of each other. You cut down the rainforest and you are going to suffer, right? Because we're connected. And not only are we connected, but we're dependent. This living planet is a closed system into which we all must share our part. And and then the last thing I was saying, the other thing was about this love thing, which I'm like all about, I think is, and in my life, the greatest experience of love for me is my children, particularly when they're babies. Particularly when they're not talking back to me and calling me all kinds of names. You know what I mean? But, the amount they taught me about love that no one else could. I love this little being, right? It didn't do anything for me. Kept me up at night, and it cost me money I didn't have. It didn't give me anything. You know what I mean? But it was just a pure love. I would give my life for that child, for that baby. And I think that's a very powerful and life-giving force. And that's where we should start and end as far as our understanding of the difficult responsibility in life. It's love like you love that baby,
Well, and that taught me so much about how I perceive of God's love towards us, because I can't be, I cannot perceive of myself as better or more moral than God. So how could God love me any less than that? If I'm capable of that kind of love towards this, as we mentioned, this thing that has done nothing for me but cost me money and make a mess. So this, I don't know. There's just, all of my kids are grown, and I get a chance now. That's the best thing. My grandkids. I was somebody wrote something the other day on Facebook, and it finally sort of captured. We joke about grandkids, like, oh, that's our reward for letting our kids live, or whatever. But actually, what it is that it's a second chance to do that better. Like I can love my grandkids the way I should have loved my kids.
Yeah,
what I mean? Because there's this chance to do it at an age when you have some wisdom.
Absolutely.
And you understand that life is fleeting and you should probably slow down and enjoy every single moment you have. That when you're a 20-something, you don't know shit. I got to go make a living. I got to go grind. I got to go, and then you wake up one day and your kids are growing. You're like, son of a bitch.
Right. I should have spent more time with them. But yeah. And grandchildren are also the other thing. I remember when my boys were like 2 and 3, we had like twin boys, 13 months apart. They call them Irish twins. I don't know whether they do that, but anyway. Sorry. I remember back in the day, they had we had the speakers. I had this incredible stereo system, right, with all speakers.
Me too.
And they would take the screens off the stick, off the speakers, and push the bubble in. They push it in.
Me too.
I was like, oh man, I can't wait till you have children. I said, I'm going to give them hammers. I'm going to give them hammers for Christmas.
And then when the time came, you didn't do that, did you?
No, not yet. I haven't done it yet.
And they don't have speakers like that anymore, so they wouldn't matter. So
right.
But no, they were destructive little kids, man.
Yeah, but you're right about growing wise enough and old enough to see the preciousness of life and to not trip, right? And okay, so she broke the dish. It's okay. I have a video of myself. I was stressed out, 21, 22-year-old. I didn't have any money. We'd make a pot of spaghetti and eat on it for 3 days. You know what I mean? And I had the 2-gallon pitcher. You know, remember those plastic pitchers of Kool-Aid? Cherry, I think it was cherry Kool-Aid. And my son, 3 years old, 2 years old, lifted up and pulled down that pitcher, and I screamed, "Wah!" I feel terrible about it, but that was me at the time. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's why my kid is damaged now, but I'll make it up if he ever has children.
Yeah,
we're young and we're stressed. We don't know what.
Yeah, we don't know. But I have an 18-month-old grandson who was at my house just this weekend, and everything I gave him to eat, he's sitting in his little walker, and everything I gave him to eat, he threw on the floor. And I'm little thing of applesauce on the floor. Whatever. He's just making it. He's just destroying my house, and my daughter is just going, like, doesn't that bother you? I'm like, nah. I mean, I'll go eat some of it and we'll clean the rest of it. Don't trip. It's not that big a deal. And she's like, oh, and you weren't just patient when I was. No, I wasn't, because I was dumb. Take a cue from me. Like if I could go back, I don't do regret. John and we've talked about this 100 times before. I don't sit around regretting. But if I had a time machine right now, I'd go back and slap my 20-year-old self and tell me to chill out.
Yeah, just relax.
It's relaxed. It's all replaceable. None of it's that important.
And here's the God thing in what you're saying. So we have to embrace our life in such a way that we see God not tripping when we throw the applesauce on the floor, right? Yeah. And we have to not trip when we watch somebody else throw the applesauce on the floor. Exactly. Yeah. So now let's go live, You
know what? That's exactly right. I think you're exactly right. And I think if we would do that, I think we'd see some change. But hey, I don't want to cut this off, but we do have to get going. And I know I want to be respectful of your time, but I don't want to forget a chance to say one more time. The book is Purplynd, Brian K Woodson, or it might be under BK Woodson on where
Brian K Woodson Sr. Yeah.
Brian K Woodson Sr. It's available wherever fine books are sold. As always, we are big supporters and proponents of local bookstores. If you can find it, great. If not, Jeff Bezos could use another $10. So, it is what it is. But we want to encourage you. I think this is a book that you're going to really like, and then you're going to want to buy the sequels when they come out. Any teasers on when book 2 might be hitting us?
I want to get it done to the editors by the end of the summer.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we won't hold you to that, but that's good to know. We're looking forward to it. We will make sure and connect everybody with you. We'll make sure and put some stuff in our show notes, ways they can reach you and get a hold of your stuff. But man, thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out.
This was great. It's good talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.